Now, I don't want to shock anybody too badly here, but not everything put out in these videos is agreed upon by everyone who listens to them. I certainly get my share of comments in defense of one team or another, but one of the teams I hear about a lot are the 2015 Denver Broncos. Around here, we evaluate the 2015 Broncos the same way we evaluate the 1985 Atlanta Falcons and every other team of the Super Bowl era, by using C-score, a metric created by this channel to give these teams an overall view beyond the simplicity of their record. For an even deeper explanation of C-score, be sure to check out the description of this video. This here are the 2015 Denver Broncos. They rate out as the 48th best of the 58 Super Bowl champions, making them the 11th worst of those Super Bowl champions. I 100% stand by those numbers when I evaluate this team, because these numbers are also factually correct. At 12-4, their point differential was only plus 59. They were 19th in the league in scoring, 4th best in points allowed. Against the 12th hardest schedule, their C-score comes out to 18.288. Moreover, they were 9-3 in one-score games and 3-1 in multiple-score games. However, it is specifically my assessment of the Broncos' defense that has received the blowback from a lot of you. They do rank 4th in points allowed, and they did not pitch a shutout the entire season. But it's been pointed out to me that those numbers do not tell the whole story. So I think it is worth taking a deeper dive on this unit. We're going to do that by putting them up against 5 other excellent defenses who were also the cornerstones of teams that won the Super Bowl. We're going back just a couple years for the first of these teams, the Legion of Boom from the 2013 Seattle Seahawks, first in the league in points allowed. We will also be looking at the 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, winners of Super Bowl 37, first in points allowed. The Baltimore Ravens come up next, considered by many the greatest modern-day defense, winners of Super Bowl 35, first in points allowed. And the standard for many, myself included to be honest, the 1985 Monsters of the Midway Chicago Bears, first in points allowed. Thank you so much for joining us today as we get these comparisons underway. And yes, let's quickly do one last look at points allowed. The Denver Broncos of 2015 allowed 296 points. That was good for 4th in the league. The rest of these teams did finish first in their respective seasons, with varying degrees of raw points allowed. It is going to be tough to compare those numbers because eras are different. That said, they all did finish first. The Broncos did not. That's been the point of contention. Let's take a look at the rest of these numbers to see if this is indeed a bit misleading. So let's try comparing these teams by yardage allowed. The Broncos allowed 4,530 yards in the 2015 season, and that was good to be first in the league. The Seahawks allowed fewer yards, finishing first. The Buccaneers fewer yards, finishing first. The Bears allowed fewer yards, finishing first. Interestingly enough, the Ravens allowed fewer yards than any of them and finished second. So again, we want to reiterate, these raw numbers can't really tell us the story. It is more important for us to see who finished where in their respective seasons. The Broncos did finish first. Now, after we just got done saying all of that, our next category is yards allowed per play, and we don't have rankings for these, we just have raw numbers. But the Broncos look very good here. 4.4 yards allowed per play. That actually matches up with both the Seahawks and the Bears. Is only 1/10 of a yard behind the Ravens. It is only 1/5 of a yard behind the Buccaneers. So Denver holds their own here. Now we're going to look at defensive takeaways. We will say from the beginning, the ability to take the ball away does not necessarily make for a good defense. The Broncos took it away 27 times, which was 8th best in the league. Going down the line here, with 39 takeaways in 2013, the Seahawks were first. The Buccaneers were third with 38 takeaways, but these two squads knew how to get the ball away from the other team. Baltimore, 49 takeaways, best in the league. Chicago, 54 takeaways, first in the league. Now we turn our attention to turnover differential, and this is going to play a part going forward. The Broncos, from their 27 takeaways, actually sit on a negative 24 turnover differential. That means their offense turned it over 31 times. Looking at the rest of these teams, the Seahawks from their 39 get a plus 20. Tampa from their 38 get a plus 17. And no surprise with the Ravens and the Bears, with as many times as they took it away, they sit here with plus 23 turnovers each. For most of the rest of these stats, we're going to go ahead and list the raw total, but we're going to stick to their rankings above all else. So with first downs allowed, the Denver Broncos, 5th best in the league. It was the Buccaneers and the Bears who were able to lead the league. The Ravens came in second, the Seahawks came in third. So Denver was last among this group, but it was pretty close. We're going to now look at specific categories. Passing yards allowed. The Broncos, best in the league in their season. So too were the Seahawks and the Buccaneers. The Bears were third best, the Ravens 8th best. Drilling it down a little deeper though, we're going to look at net pass yards per attempt, which does take sacks into account. The Broncos led the league. So too did Seattle and Tampa. Chicago and Baltimore showed themselves to be a little bit more run defense oriented. That said, the Bears were still second best, the Ravens 7th best. Looking specifically now at rush yards allowed, this is going to be a raw number. The Broncos were third best. The Seahawks and the Buccaneers, very good, 7th best and 5th best. The Ravens and the Bears, as we stated, rush defense oriented, especially the Ravens, keeping teams under 1,000 yards for the season. They both did finish first in the league for their seasons. Looking at rush yards per attempt, the Broncos third in rush yards, but first in yards per attempt, whereas the Seahawks and the Buccaneers remain at 7th and 5th place. The Ravens do stay in first place, while the Bears actually dropped to 6th. This indicates that they were leading a lot of their games and didn't face nearly as many rush attempts. Our next group of stats are actually going to keep the Bears out of our comparisons, because these stats are not readily available going back to the 1985 season. This is a bit unfortunate, but we're still getting some good information here. And we're going to start with score percentage. That is, what percentage of drives ended in a score. Starting off with the Bears, we're just going to have some question marks here. Those are going to stay throughout this subset. The Broncos, 26.9% was good for second best in the league. That raw percentage, again, is going to be higher than these other teams. Context does matter. The Seahawks and the Buccaneers do finish first in these categories, while the Ravens finish second. The Broncos are right up there with them. Turnover percentage now, the amount of drives that end in a turnover. The Broncos, as stated earlier, weren't big on takeaways. They finished 14th in this category, whereas the Seahawks and the Ravens do come in first, and the Buccaneers come in fourth. We are going to revisit this turnover situation by the end, I promise. Starting field position. This is a big one because the defense has absolutely zero control over where they're placed onto the field. And this is where the Broncos really get it bad. They were 30th in the league. Only 2 teams were on the field in a worse starting position than the Broncos. The rest of these teams did pretty okay. Seattle finished 6th, Tampa finished 3rd, Baltimore finished 2nd. These are certainly beneficial numbers for these teams and are detrimental to the Broncos. Even with that starting field position, we can look at average drive time and see the Broncos did a pretty good job of getting off the field, being 6th in that category. Somewhat surprisingly, the Seahawks drop all the way down to 22nd, while the Ravens are 1st and the Buccaneers are 3rd. This can run somewhat together with plays per drive. Now, times are different. The play clock is shorter than it used to be. Offenses do move faster. So this stat isn't really all that indicative, but we still can glean some information. The Broncos are able to come in second, as do the Buccaneers. The Ravens were first, and the Seahawks, somewhat parallel to the average drive time they faced, come in 12th. Now come some important stats. We're going to start off with yards per drive. The Broncos allowed 22.5 yards per drive during the 2015 season. That was good for first in the league. The other teams here are either first or second. Seattle and Tampa at first, Baltimore at second. And points per drive, the Broncos at 1.38. We want to reiterate, let's take a look at the rest of these teams. Their raw number is higher, but the Ravens and the Buccaneers played in slightly different eras. The bottom line here, though, all of these teams finished first. There is one more stat I'd wish to look at, and this is admittedly a team stat that cannot be put on the defense, but I am going to get to why we're talking about it. As far as one possession games go, the Broncos played in 12 of them. 3/4 of their season came down to one possession, and they went 9-3 in those games. The Seahawks saw half their games come down to that when they went 5-3. The Ravens also almost half 7 of those games at 4-3. The Buccaneers only needed 1/4 of their games, and they were 2-2. Then, of course, there were the Bears, who were blowing everybody out, only playing 2 one-possession games, of which they both won. Why is this important? It tells us how much of the drives that these defenses faced were actually meaningful. When we looked at the Bears, where they were first in the league in rush yards allowed, but only 6th in rushes allowed per attempt, that tells us that they faced fewer meaningful drives. They had the lead in a lot of their games. As we can see, 14 of their games were decided by more than one possession, and they won 13 of those. So the Broncos are a bit more apt to put out better numbers because they faced more meaningful drives. The question now becomes, with that in mind, and with all these other aspects that we've taken a look at, are the Denver Broncos really an all-time great defense, and has my assessment of them been wrong? So, as far as my evaluation for all of this, the fact that the defense of the 2015 Denver Broncos can even stand toe-to-toe against the defenses they just did without looking horribly out of place is a major point in their favor. Had we tried this with, say, the 2007 or 2011 New York Giants, we would have gotten drastically different results, even though those were 2 defenses good enough to win Super Bowls as the superior side of the ball on their respective teams. For the Broncos, it is in these stats that really count, such as points and yards per drive, especially when lined up against average starting field position, where one thing becomes very clear. It's that my prior assessments of the 2015 Denver Broncos as a total team have been completely accurate. But my characterization of their defense has not been accurate. I would maybe struggle to rate them ahead of these other 4 defenses, but even if they were to be slotted right behind them in 5th place, that is mighty fine company. To top things off, this Broncos defense had the lowest producing offense of the other 4 teams, and had to deal with a negative turnover differential, leaving them behind the 8 ball in such a consistent manner that those other teams could never know. That right there was the major crux of the argument against my prior assessments when talking about this defense. Thus, I officially repudiate my past statements on the defense of the 2015 Denver Broncos, and I hereby declare their official crowning as an all-time great defensive unit. With good tidings toward all, I offer my humblest apologies unto all, and in particular these players and the coaches they played for, who we are listing here. For all of you who came at me with these claims, I hereby doff my cap upon you. You were right, I gave it a deeper dive. The 2015 Denver Broncos aren't the greatest team, but it's not because of their defense. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I have no problem admitting when I am wrong about something. I just let the numbers lead me wherever they shall go. I was just looking at the wrong path this time. Please do the whole YouTube thing, give the video a like, some shares, subscribe to the channel, and ding that bell to be notified about all future videos. Let me know what you think about all of this. I'd love to hear specifically from those who have defended the 2015 Broncos defense in the past, but as always, all thoughts are welcome. Please be sure to check out the many videos this channel has to offer. Thank you so much for all of your support. And until next time, I hope you have an awesome day.